Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the By Word Show. I'm so glad you're here today. Thanks for joining us. You guys, we're in for a treat today. We're going to be getting real. I'm just going to say right from the get go, we're talking about imposter syndrome with Bree Clark today. And before we hit record, I was talking about how we've never specifically discussed this on a show, but you guys have asked about this one for a while now. So I figured it was time. So Bree, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, Hannah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to dive into this.
Oh my goodness, I am too. So before we get in, I would love for our listeners just to get to know you a little bit better. So could you tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a Texas gal here in Austin, Texas. Born and raised in Texas, but we have moved all over the place. So when I say we, I mean my husband, who I've been married to for almost 11 years now. And every time I say that, it's like, oh gosh. And I promise I'm not that old. And I have a son who's 6, and I am pregnant with our soon-to-be little girl. And
Oh,
by the time this airs, she'll probably be here. She was a
wow.
surprise, so we're super excited about that. But I've been a multimedia journalist. I've been a news anchor, a news reporter, now talk show host. I've been doing that just as long as I've been married, a little longer. And, you know, in that time, just found that people just needed to talk about some things that they weren't talking about. And that led me down this road on
Yeah.
research on imposter syndrome. So,
Okay. So I'm so curious before we get into the nitty gritty of your research and all the things that you've uncovered about imposter syndrome, what has your own experience and journey been like? Like, what initially led you to dive into this topic?
yeah. So, my own experience with imposter syndrome. Um, I was noticing in my industry when I'm talking to other reporters and other news anchors that not all of them, but quite a few of them were just dealing with this inability to feel like they were good enough, like they had accomplished enough. Nothing was ever good enough. We were always beating ourselves up. And in media, it's hard because you're expected to put on your 110 face all the time. And so it's hard. It's hard to figure out where you begin and where your job ends when you live,
Mm,
breathe, and sleep your job. I mean, from the
right.
moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, it's your story. It's how did I look? Did I do this right? What am I going to wear tomorrow? Do I have my camera equipment? Because you do everything, and a lot of people don't realize that you do everything. And so I was hired as the main anchor at one of my stations. And I remember going down this rabbit hole of, I can't believe they hired me. They made a mistake. Should they do this? Some of the time.
Mm,
Some of the time I'd walk in there just confident, like, yeah, I can do this. We're gonna do this. This is great. But there were times where I just felt like they're gonna figure out that they made a mistake and someone's gonna fire me. And that was, and I realized after looking into these thoughts and figuring out that this was something that I had dealt with before. It was just magnified by the fact that I was in this very public position, and a lot of people around me were feeling the same way. When I actually
mm,
sat down to talk to them, when I would have other reporters come and talk to me, it was this anxiety of, oh my gosh, I suck at this. And a lot of them, I was thinking, no, you're great. You're great. Right. And so I had heard the term before, imposter syndrome, and I decided, I'm going to dive deep into this. And there wasn't a lot of research out there, but I knew that the feelings that I was reading from the study done back in the 70s, that's how long we've known about this, that I was feeling a lot of those things, a lot of those red flags, those red flag thoughts that were, hey, I'm not good enough. I'm just lucky. Oh, they're going to find me out type things were coming to my mind. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I'm not dealing with depression or anxiety or some of these other things that I think I'm dealing with. This is the root. And so that's where that came about, because I very much was dealing with imposter syndrome myself as a news anchor. So
mm. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I feel like you're right. It can be confusing at times because I feel like a lot of women deal with this at some point in their life, whether it's related to their job or something that they're pursuing, passion or whatever it may be. And it may seem like, okay, what is the deal? Like, is it anxiety? It doesn't feel like depression, but you mentioned these red flags. So, can you just go ahead and break down what exactly is imposter syndrome? How does it show up? How do we like learn to recognize that's what it is?
Yeah. Okay. So imposter syndrome, if I just water it down very quickly, it's just an inability for someone to recognize their accomplishments or own them, or their worth or their place in society. That is what imposter syndrome is. And a lot of times with everybody lashing on to this recently, a lot of people are getting it a little wrong. They think, oh, it's you're being fake. You're not being yourself. And you need to learn to be
Mm,
yourself. And that is not what imposter syndrome is. It's people who are very successful, who are doing the things, who are crushing it, who have this blindness to what they're actually doing, or
mm,
this lack of confidence that they are actually the ones who are pulling these things off. Especially entrepreneurs, people who are in college, experience this. Women more than men, moms even. They go through
mm,
this. I'm not momming like that mom on Instagram. I'm not cut out for this. I'm not a good mom. I'm not a mom at all. And so that is what you're dealing with when you're dealing with imposter syndrome. And a lot of those red flags that you see are some of the things that I talked about in my own journey. It's that self, that's inner critic that's telling you, hey, I'm not good enough. I didn't do this all on my own. I can't possibly, be responsible for this. Yes, that was great, but it could be better. Those types of things. And so
mm.
I tell people to really listen to what those thoughts are and just kind of identify where they're coming from and write them down if they have to, because we trick ourselves, into pushing those away as life, everyday life goes on. And so you might forget, or you might not see the pattern at first until you have it just right in front of you in black and white. Oh my gosh, I'm dealing with this, you know. And I tell people it's also not a lack of confidence because people think, oh, well, she's so confident. I'm a very confident woman, but there are times where there's an inconsistency in that confidence where I'm just like, yesterday I felt great. Today I'm like, oh my gosh, like, who am I to be doing this? Even with my talk show, who am I to have a talk show was the biggest factor for us making the talk show about imposter syndrome because we felt like people really needed to know that this was a thing, and that this was a mental health journey just like depression, just like anxiety, just like bipolar, just like these other things that people deal with. And you have to identify because there are actual real consequences for something like this to run rampant without you dealing with it.
Yeah, well, that totally makes sense, and I think the identification piece that you're talking about is so crucial because it almost sounds like it's one of those things that if you don't learn to identify and you kind of let it keep festering and growing on the inside, it catches up to you, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Oh my goodness, what do I do?" So, what was the breaking point for you where you were like, "Okay, I realize this is what I'm dealing with and something has got to change?"
Yeah. So it was actually probably towards the end when I was shifting careers from being full-time journalist to trying to figure out how to be home more with my son, who was starting kindergarten at the time. And I just realized I was just beating myself up to the point to where I was at the station at like 5 o'clock in the morning. My shift had ended at 11 and I'm still there, at 5 o'clock in the morning trying to tweak these packages, trying to, going over the show that I had just done, just criticizing every point and just making myself exhausted. And finally, I sat down and it was actually my husband. I bring him up a lot because he's my support when it comes to this. Um, he said, "Bree, these are lies. These are lies from the enemy. Let's go through the list of things that show you that there's a complete opposite when it comes to this." And he says, "You've been doing this for how long? How many awards have you gotten? How many cards have you gotten from the community saying thank you for doing this? Thank you for being here. We like that you're here." How many, other stations have come to you and say, "Hey, do you want to come and work for us?" He says, "That's
Mm,
not some fluke. These people don't know you. They don't just like you when all of a sudden you're getting jobs. That's not how the world operates, right?" And it was these type of conversations that we had to have over and over and over again because I was finding myself exhausted, depressed, and on the brink of just feeling like, why am I here? You know,
mm.
those talks, right? And then seeing the other people around me also feeling that way. And I said, no, something has to change because this is becoming more of a everyday thing, not a just someday type thing. And when you get to that point, it's hard to pull yourself out of that. The deeper that you sink into depression, the deeper that you sink into anxiety, the harder it is to see that light or to see the truth that
Yeah.
you are worthy, that you are more than enough, that you've done the work, that you've done this and you're okay and you're going to be okay. That it's very hard to get out of that if you go too deep. And I was getting very deep into those weeds.
It's so interesting that you're talking about how you were experiencing it, but then you also had the perspective of watching these other women go through it as well.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that must have been interesting too to see like, okay, this other woman is saying, "Oh, I feel like I am not good enough." But you see all of her accomplishments. And
Yeah.
on the outside, I'm sure it's easy to say, "What are you talking about? You
Yeah.
have all of the credentials, you've got all of the proof, you know? So how can you doubt yourself like that?" But then we ourselves, like it's so easy to do. So where do you think that imposter syndrome actually comes from? Like how do we get in our heads like that?
Yeah. There's 2 places. So for a lot of us, it starts with childhood, there's
Mm.
some things that were said over you, said to you, that you carry through life. And if you don't address those things, or if you don't have someone who comes along and says, "That's not true," right? If you're not being very open about these things that you've been told, then there's no way for you to break that lie or whatever trauma that is that you're experiencing, right? The
Yeah.
other hand of it is society. We have a lot that goes on in society. And so you're having society tell you that you need to look a certain way, that you need to act a certain way to be successful, that you need to have this many followers on social media. That's something that's very new. Um, for our generation when it comes to having to compare ourselves to other people. Before it was
Right.
just the woman across the hall or, the people that you saw at school. Now it's everybody. It's the entire world that you're comparing yourself to, and that is exhausting, right?
Yeah.
So those lies start there. They start there, and as you get older, they take root. And it's hard to garden up that root when it's been there for 20, 30, 40 years, and
Yep.
so I tell people the sooner you recognize this, the sooner you do the work, the sooner you look at that inventory, the better. Because the longer you go it alone, the longer you're going to have this issue. And so you talked about these people that were around me. I was very fortunate to have other people who were experiencing this, whether they knew it or not,
Mm.
because that's the only way I was able to identify, okay, wait a minute, this isn't just something I'm dealing with. Because the biggest part of imposter syndrome, the lie that takes root, is that you're the only person who feels this way. And
Yeah.
if you tell someone you feel this way, they're going to tell you you're right, that you aren't good enough, that they don't
Mhm.
know why they hired you, that they don't know why you got this job, but you're here, so you might as well continue, right? These are the things that your brain tells you. And so you hide behind those things. Um,
Yeah.
you don't unmask imposter syndrome. And so that is where I tell people why it's very important to do that work. Even if you think you might be going through this, you might not hit all the ticks, but think about it. What is it that I'm thinking? What are these thoughts or these lies that I'm telling myself or have been told from other people? And are they true? And most of the time, they're not.
That totally makes sense. I love the analogy that you used of like they really start to take root because it's like, the longer we let them stick around, the deeper they go. And then, as you mentioned, the longer we sit in that, the harder it is to kind of like crawl our way out. But how did you in your own life start to uproot some of those lies and do the work to like heal and overcome them?
Yeah. So therapy was a big part for me.
Mm.
I really believe in therapy. I didn't at first. It actually took a friend tricking me into going to session for me to even get into therapy. She says, "Hey, I want you to talk to my friend," right? She didn't tell me her friend was a therapist. Um, says, "Hey, I want you to talk to my friend. I really think that she can help you. I'll come with you." So I'm sitting in this therapist's office. My friend is nowhere to be found, and I'm there
Oh
by
my gosh.
myself, angry that I'm talking to this therapist about things I don't want to talk to them about, right? So I'm talking to them about this, and therapy really helped me identify some of these things. Um, at first, we just thought it was depression. You're dealing with some really bad depression, not you're dealing with burnout because you feel like you're an imposter and you're trying to prove yourself and
Mm,
everyone else wrong, right? So it took a while to realize, well, that's the issue. Also, community around me, finding people who knew me well enough, who loved me, and who weren't just yes men, but people who were willing to give me constructive criticism, who would talk through these thoughts with me, no matter how many times I brought them up, right? They were very
mm,
patient people who said, okay, we talked about this last week, but let's talk about it again.
yeah.
You think that you are X, Y, and Z, and that you got lucky or that you're not good enough at this, and they would list all the things that show the opposite of that. They said, "No, look, this is what's true, right?" And they challenged me not to allow my brain to flip what they said because it's easy for you to say, "Well, they love me, so of course they think that." Or,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I did do that, but I didn't do, all of these other things, right? It wasn't hard
Yeah.
enough," those types of things. And I had these people who really challenged me. They said, "No, sit in what I just told you. And that's period. What I just said is a fact. It's not subjective. It's not something that I just think I didn't." They never said, "Oh, I just think you're great." Right.
Yeah.
With imposter syndrome, that's not something that hits them well. Sometimes that even makes it worse. Oh, they think I'm great. I'm not great. Right. So they would tell me things that were very factual, things that I could not refute, or
Mm,
I couldn't refute wholly. It's like an author. If they wrote a book, they wrote a book. They're an author. That's plain fact. Doesn't matter
mhm.
how many books they've sold, doesn't matter, how fast they did it, when they completed it, any of that. If you wrote a book, you're an author, right? And so it was those types of facts that they gave me. They were like, "You are a news anchor. You were on the news." Right. You did that. You were on the news and not just for, a week or two. You were on the news for a long time and you replaced this person that the community loved. Like you are a news anchor. And so
Mm,
that is how I started to get out of that is looking at the facts of, hey, I am a wife. My husband does love me, right? I am a mom. My child ate today and he's healthy. He's thriving. We're good, right? So those are the types of things that helped me start to remap my thinking, to start to look at
mm,
myself a little differently, and look at the facts that I had self-worth, right? Look at the facts that I was loved. And so therapy, community, and then faith. Yeah, it'd be hard for me to sit here and say that I got through all of this just by sheer willpower because that's not something that I could do alone. It was also me looking at the truths of God, what He says about me, what He says, that not just that I'm powerfully and wonderfully made, not just those things, but the fact that He saw fit enough to put me where He put me, right?
right.
That He opened doors. And with my friends, we would look at things that were completely impossible because that's where the imposter syndrome comes from. When the things feel impossible, it's like, there's no way I couldn't have gotten this on my own. Yeah, that's because God opened that door and He wouldn't have opened that door if He didn't want me to be there.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's those three things combined that just started breaking away some of those lies that I was telling myself, some of those thoughts, and that lack of self-worth that I was feeling, and kind of helped me get, to a better place. And I'm not all the way there. And I don't think people really ever get all the way there, but it does get better.
Mhm.
It does get easier. And those lies get a lot quieter.
I love all of that. And I think it was such a good point what you said. I think earlier too, you mentioned it's almost like a blindness when it comes to imposter syndrome. And so the fact that you brought other people in to kind of show you what you weren't able to see in the moment because you were so it was just blocked out by all the lies you were believing. That's so huge. Like inviting people into the process, like you said with therapy, like that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So, how did you start letting people into your process?
Yeah. I had no choice because
Mm.
I had gotten to a point where things were a little sketchy. I was getting to a point where I just felt like I no longer had a hold on who I was, right?
Mhm.
And it was affecting everyday life. It wasn't just affecting work, it was affecting family, it was affecting my health, it was affecting a lot of things. And I had people who I had already had some relationship with who could look at me and say, "What's going on? What's happening?" But I had to make the decision to let them in. And I think you get it to a point um, where you have no choice but to let some things slip when you're
Mhm.
in that space. And for the people around you to lean in and say, "Okay, we need to talk about this. What is going on?" Right? And you having the courage of just being honest, not thinking, "Oh my gosh, if I tell them this, they're going to run away." If they
Right.
do, they were never meant to go through that with you to begin with, right? I say
Yeah.
that whatever you're going through, whatever hard thing, when it comes to community, it's a blessing because either it helps them in the process too, which a lot of my friends were like, "I didn't realize I was dealing with this as well. And I'm so glad that you were
Mm.
vulnerable enough to talk to me about this." Or you have people that just disappear. And that's fine too. That shows you that that person wasn't even meant to be there to begin with, right? So there's this
Mm.
growth that happens in allowing yourself to do that. But it took a lot. It took a lot of letting your guard down, especially being a news anchor, because you're supposed to
Mm.
look like everything's okay all the time. If you're gonna
Right.
break it down do it during a commercial break. Don't do it on the air, right? And so there was this barrier that I really had to work hard um, to get past, but it was already starting to strip away anyway because I just didn't feel like me. I
Mm.
wasn't being myself. And so that wall was already starting to strip away. The deeper I went into feeling, like I wasn't supposed to be where I was or feeling a little hopeless, the
Mm.
deeper I went into that, the more that barrier got removed and the more that I had no choice but to let people in to say, "Hey, what is going on? Can I help?" But it was up to me to say, "Yes. I need help with this." And the more that
Mm.
I touched with these people, the more that I let let them see parts of me that I didn't want them to see. Um, but that was okay. That was okay. There was a lot of growth from that, and it gave me what I needed to. I wouldn't have my talk show if I wouldn't have gone through, the process. And I think a lot of people think that they're going to lose something when there's so much more to gain when you have these conversations.
That's so good. That's so good. Because it can be so scary to start opening up about that. And I feel like that's even part of the lies, kind of what you mentioned. Are people going to leave? Will they look at me differently? All of those fears that we have that come with being vulnerable. But really, the vulnerability is a huge piece of the healing and the solution. So I love that you pointed that out. And I would also love to hear about your faith journey navigating through this too, because you mentioned this idea of proving. And I feel like so many women struggle with that, even in their faith and their relationship with God. So, what was all of that side, the spiritual side, like for you?
Oh, it was hard. Jesus and I had some conversations where I'm like, "Okay, Lord, I don't know what you're doing. Um,
Yeah.
but I need you." There were even times where I was just asking him, like, why would you do this? Why would you set me up this way to fail? There were a lot of conversations that I had where I felt a little forsaken because those lies were so deep. It's
Mm.
how could you put me in front of all these people and then allow me to fail and allow me to not do the best that I could? And his answer to me was constantly, you aren't failing.
Mm.
You aren't failing. I'm here with you. You aren't failing. But the interesting thing when I would talk to him about this is he never would acknowledge that insecurity that I had. He would always
Mm.
just speak the truth to me, right? And that's kind of where I feel like I got my framework is because Jesus was never like, he never coddled me and said, "Oh, you're gonna be okay. I love you so much." He would tell me he loved me, but it was never, "Oh, look at you. You're doing great. You're awesome. I love
Mm.
you." It was, "I've put you here for a reason. I've put you here for a purpose. You have a purpose." He would just speak his truths to me instead of going into those lies really deep with me. He would just confront them,
Mm.
head on. And so it was very hard because there were times where I'm just like, This isn't true. And you can't possibly be good, if this is how you go about things." Um, but he just was very patient with me, and my faith with him was a very up and down roller coasters type situation as I went through this process. And I
Mm.
think that's also something that I want people to know is going through this process, especially if you're a person of faith. It is going to feel like a peak and valley yo-yo. It's not going to be linear at all. You're not going to start feeling confident more and more day by day until you feel fine. You're not going to feel self-worth day by day by day until you love yourself unconditionally. That's not going to happen. It's going to be okay, God, I trust you. This is going to be okay. And you're going to be able to sing, those praises, and you're going to be able to read those scriptures. But then there are going to be days where you feel like you've just been dropped, and you're going to say, "You know what? No, I was right to begin with. This, you can't possibly have a purpose for me." And it's going to go up and down. But those peaks and valleys, the bandwidth, that is going to get shorter, and that
Mm.
is going to feel different. You're going to have those thoughts for just a second instead of you harping on them all day. You know, that's the difference that you're going to see as you go through this. And so being able to talk with God and pray with God and just being honest with him about how I felt, because that's the other thing. Not only are you not honest with the people around you because you're not sure what they're going to say, you're not always honest with God when you're going through something
Right.
like this. You're like, "Hey, I just need your help." But you're not honest with the anger that you feel. You're not honest with the sadness that you feel, or the trickery that you feel, because it is a trick, but the trick is not coming from God. That trick is coming from the enemy instead. And so it took a while for me to accept that, although that I'm feeling this, although my brain is going and my heart is going through this roller coaster of emotions, this is not coming from God. God is not
Mm.
doing this to me. He's there with me. He's allowing me to go through this process, but this isn't coming from him. And so I had to give a lot of it to him and just say, "This is how I'm feeling." As ugly as it was, as disrespectful as it may seem to some people, I had to let him know how I was feeling and realize that he was bigger than my anger, bigger than my
Mm.
fear, bigger than my depression, bigger than my anxiety, and bigger than my imposter syndrome, right? Because he I mean, he is the ultimate real deal, right? And so he had to come in and talk to me about these things. And so that's how my faith journey really looked with him. Was a lot of frustration, was a lot of fighting, was a lot of telling him, "How could you?" To get to the point of, this isn't him. This isn't the root isn't coming from him, and
Mm.
allowing him to be the light in that, to speak truth into that, to reassure me and confirm that with the people around me, right? He would tell me something,
Yeah.
and then I would have a friend come and tell me the same thing, and that's how good he was with it. It was like, I would have these discussions with God, and I'd be like, "Okay, well, maybe." And then I'd get on the phone with a friend, and they'd say the same exact thing, word for word.
Hmm.
And that's how gracious and patient he was with me, because he knows I'm hard-headed. He's like, "Look, I do love you. You do have a purpose here," And so I he will meet you wherever you are. And so that, with imposter syndrome, overcoming it, he's he's been every part of that for me.
That's so good. Man, thank you for sharing that. I think that's so I just love how real you are about that, about being in the process, because I feel like sometimes we have this misconception that, okay, I am coming to God with my issue and he's going to heal me and it'll be a one and done and it'll be like you were saying, confident more and more every day, and then I'll be perfect forever from there or whatever. But it really is it's just a process. Like, there will be more hard days coming. There will be days where there's doubt again. There will be days when it's hard again, but it's more, at least what I'm learning in the journey right now, is like it's not about just getting better and better so that I have overcome all the things, you know. It's more and more just learning. It's a coming back to him over and over, a continual growth and reliance on him that's
Yeah.
stretching our faith even through the hard stuff, because like you said, it's not just, "Oh god, I need your help," like trying to keep it all together, but not really getting real about what's going on. I mean, he knows it's there anyway. Like,
Yeah.
he wants to be in the process with us. He loves us. That's part of the relationship. But I feel like sometimes we even hold ourselves back when we're not willing to be real with him. Because when we aren't honest about where we're at, it kind of like robs us the opportunity to experience his healing and his goodness when he comes and meets us right where we're at, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the hard part. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's good for people to know that it's not like, here's the answer to your imposter syndrome and like here's the step-by-step program where you'll never have to deal with it again, you know.
Yeah.
So what has been your experience now, because you have this talk show and you've dedicated a lot of time to researching
Yeah.
and being in the process yourself so that now you can help other people. So when you're talking to other women about this, what are some things that you want them to know about imposter syndrome?
Yeah. I want them to know how tricky it is. You know, I want them to know that it's something that they really have to unmask. It's there's no, just like you said, there's no step-by-step guide, because I do have people to come to me, and they come with their pen and their piece of paper, which is good, and they think, "Okay, hey, how are we gonna fix this? How are you gonna fix me?" Because a lot of the women who deal with this are type A personality women, and they're like, "Okay, let me do,
Me.
let me check, check, check. What do I need to do?" And that's not this process. This process, it looks different for everybody. The way that I deal with imposter syndrome is not the way someone else is going to deal with imposter syndrome, right? I'm a woman of color. It's going to look different. I'm a younger woman, and it's going to look different, than other people. And so I tell them your journey with imposter syndrome and the lies that you tell yourself are going to be similar, but very unique to you and your story. And so
Mm,
I tell them I do have like this 3 steps to get them started, right? Because people wanna get started. "Let's do this. Let's fix this."
right.
And so I tell them to write everything down. Write every thought, no matter what it is, even if you're not sure if it's an imposter lie, just write it down if it doesn't sit well with you. Write it down, and then go through and write the opposite. Write those facts that I was talking about
Mm,
that, your community might be able to bring to you, or things that you just know when you're having your healthy days, right? Because this might
mm,
not be something you're able to do in one setting. You might have to write down all those lies as they're happening. I know for me that's hard, because when I'm in it, I don't want to do anything to help myself feel better.
right?
But when you have a chance to remember some of those, just write them down. Write down that list. And then either that same day or another day, you write down the opposite. Write down the facts as they come to you, right? As I prayed about this, there are things that got highlighted for me. And I was like, I completely forgot about that. I
Mm,
completely forgot that was a thing, that I even did that, right? Um, and so that's what's tricky about this. It will make you forget everything that you've done that's even remotely good. And you'll have
mm,
to, those are the things, time with God, that He brings those things back to our memory and our recollection. And our
mm,
community brings that back to our memory and our recollection. So you write those things down. And then you make sure that you share it with somebody that you trust. I believe that this group shouldn't be too big, right? It should be maybe 1 or 2 people that you share this list with, that you trust. And you say, these are the thoughts that I've been having. These are the facts that I wrote. I'm giving you permission to hold me accountable. I'm giving you
mm,
permission to speak life into these areas, without me getting defensive, without me pushing you away, without me saying no, without me stopping the conversation and running away, those types of things. And so I tell people that this is the 3 steps to start. But above all, you got to figure out where those lies came from
mm,
while you're doing this work. Where did that come from? Was it a parent? Was it a teacher? Was it a friend? Was it a relationship that you had that wasn't healthy? where these lies came about. And you need to start trying to break that away from you as much as you can, and
Yeah.
realize that none of that was true. Because if you can't identify where it came from to begin with, it's going to be very hard for you to try and tell yourself that those things aren't true if you have no idea where they came from. So just like you got to figure out where that depression started or that anxiety started, or why you feel that way, the same with imposter syndrome. You have to figure out where that started, where that root is, because you can't just cut away the limbs and hope that it goes away. They're going to grow back. You have to uproot
Mm.
that entire tree, that entire plant. You have to do that work. And so that's what I tell people when they're trying to kind of get started. But when women come to me and they think it's going to be like this quick and easy process that they can do, and then in 2 months they'll be fine. No, this is going to be some work that you have to do. And it's going to be work that you're going to have to pause and pick back up again at times, right? Because it is work and life gets in the way, and you have, your family and your kids and your job and your
Right.
work. But it is important to try to be a little consistent with being vigilant about it, because there were times where I thought, "Oh, I'm good. I'm cured. I'm great. I'm happy." And then something else would come, and it would just bring those lies all back up to the
Mm.
surface. Um,
Yeah.
and I would have to start over, you know. And I don't want someone to be discouraged when they hear that, like, "Oh man, I might have to just start over." I want you to think about it as you get to start over. You get to do this process. You get to break whatever this curse is, and
Mm.
find real joy, because at the other side of this is real joy for yourself, real self-worth
Yes.
for yourself, and a purpose to help people, because the very process that you take that's different from what I take may take you on a whole nother journey of helping people in a different way that I can't reach them, right? And so that's why this work, I love it. It's very important, and I just want people to embrace the time it's going to take to
Mm.
heal from some of these things.
That's so good. I love that. And I am so curious now, like, so for someone who's starting, I feel like that's an excellent place to start because I feel like once you get in the process of recognizing and having that awareness, it becomes easier to get back to truth.
Mm.
And so for you, who's someone who's been on this journey for quite a while now, what are some things that you kind of do as maybe like a quote maintenance phase to continually keep that truth front of mind?
Yeah, rest, giving myself
That's
some
so
rest.
good.
That is my maintenance, because I know that I'm the type of person, the way I deal with imposter syndrome is to work, is to do more work,
Mm.
do something. I can't sit still. If I'm not doing something, then I have no purpose, which is not true. Um, because being is just as important as doing. And so when I find myself doing a lot, I rest. And in that rest, I think, why do I feel like I have to do this thing right now? Right? Why do I feel like I have to do what is making me feel like I need to do work right now? And that is one of the things that helps. So whatever it is that you go to, because there's 5 types. And on our website and stuff, we talk about that, the 5 types of imposter syndrome. And so for me,
Mm.
I'm the superwoman. I feel like I should be able to do everything without asking anybody for help. And so for me, the antidote to that is actually making myself rest, which is very uncomfortable, but I do it. And I said, "No, you need to sit down." And the funny part about in this season is God gave me a baby. I am pregnant. I have no choice. I sit down and I'm out, and so he's forced me to rest. He's like, "Okay," because there's a time where I'm like, "Okay, I rested. I did the thing. It's been 2 months. All
Right.
right, do all the things." And he's like, "Oh, you're so hard-headed. No, here, you know, for you to have." And so I've been forced to rest. I've been forced to ask for help. I've been forced to let some things go. If the dishes aren't done, the dishes aren't done. And so that is kind of what has really, really helped me. And I tell people, if you don't know where you are when it comes to imposter syndrome, start with rest. And if that rest
Mm.
feels like laziness, then that's where you probably need to be, is there,
Wow.
because rest isn't laziness. We work from our rest. We don't we don't work to rest. As
Yes.
people. And so that's That's what has helped me the most.
Oh my gosh, I am in the same boat. That's so funny. You're telling me this about having a baby. I just had a baby,
Yeah.
and it's been exactly the same for me because I am similar to you. It's just I thrive on the go go go. Love my work, throw myself into it, and then I realize most of the time that I need to rest once I'm like pushing exhaustion and burnout. Like once I'm right on the edge, I'm like, okay, something needs to change. And then I have this baby, like this pregnancy that was really hard. And now this baby where I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm anticipating the slowing down that's been happening. And I just see what a gift it has been because I am someone who feels like I can only do the purpose thing. You've talked a lot throughout this conversation about the idea of self worth. Like, I attach that a lot to my work, and I feel like a lot of women do.
Mhm.
And so I love what you said about like start with rest. And then if that feels uncomfortable or lazy, then that's a sure sign. Cause I'm just like nodding my head over here, y'all. Like, that's so me. It's so me because I attach a lot of my worth to my work. So talk to us about the self-worth piece and how that is kind of connected to the imposter syndrome thing.
Yeah. Well, so with imposter syndrome, a lot of it is if you can't acknowledge that you accomplished this or you did it on your own, you probably also have a false idea of what your worth is, your self-worth is, or you're attaching it to what you're doing. It's if I complete this, then I have worth. If I contribute on whatever level you've given yourself, then I have some type of worth. And if I don't, then I'm useless, right? That is a big part of imposter syndrome. And so what I like to tell people is that your self-worth, it can't come from anywhere anywhere else but right with you and with God, right?
Mm.
So let's focus on the with you part. You have to know in your mind that the moment that you were formed, the moment that you were in your mother's womb, you had worth. You had worth. You were born and you had worth. You continued through this world and you had worth. And it was nothing that you did when you were born, you cried out. That was all you could do, to let people know, hey, I'm here, right? And I tell people that cry was your cry of acknowledging I have worth, I'm here. And that is
Mm,
the only thing that should define that I am here. Not I'm doing, not I've done the things, not I'm going to do the things. I'm here. That is where your self-worth comes from
mm,
because there's no one like you. We talk about that on my show as well, that there's only one you. And you're very uniquely designed to provide only what you can provide. And there's a lot of people out there who are like, well, there's a million people that can do what I do, or there's a million people. I remember at one point I thought anybody could mom my parent, or parent my child is what I thought. Anybody can parent my child. And my husband had to look me in the eye and say, "You are the person who made this child, and you are the best mom for him because he came from you, right?" And I mean, that's true for me. Like we can go down a rabbit hole on other versions of that, but for me, it was you had this child, you are his mom. There's no one else who can do that. And that should be that way in every facet of your life, right?
mm,
No one can walk in your skin. No one can walk in your skin the way that you can. They can try and act like you, they can try and look like you, they can try and sound like you, but no one is going to be you. And that is where your worth comes from, that you are here. And so that's what I tell people when it comes to self. And then when the God portion is that he formed you. He gave you life and he decided to put you here, which he didn't have to do. A lot of people think, "Oh, well, I'm here because I'm just here." It's like, "No, you didn't have to be here. You did
mm,
not have to be here." The sole fact that God created you and that you're here on this earth means that you have some worth, right? Whether you believe it or not. The person that you least expect is looking to you, loves you, cares about you, and your life impacts them, whether you talk to them on a daily basis or not. It could be that homeless person that you see on the street and they know your car and they know your face. And there's something about
Mhm.
you that makes their day okay just by seeing you. You didn't give them anything, you didn't talk to them, none of that. Just them seeing you changes their day. It's a marker in their day, right? And
Yeah.
if you aren't here, what would that mean? We don't know. But the point is that you being here is the most important part, and that God placed you here for a reason that you might not even know and you may never know. But you are here and you have self-worth.
That is so good. Wow, I love that. And oh man, I feel like we've just barely scratched the surface of this conversation and all there is to it. So that's why I love that you've dedicated your talk show to providing more and more information about this. But I would love to know before we go, is there anything else specific you would want to say to a woman who's just in the valley right now, just
Yeah.
struggling with this idea of worth, struggling with imposter syndrome?
Yeah. Just tell them just to keep going, to keep going. Not white knuckling their way through it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying just to keep going, just to keep breathing and being here just as the days go on, because that you have no choice but to move up the mountain at some point, up to move up that peak, right? That valley is there, but none of us can stay there. None of us can stay there, and none of us have a set timeline. Just to keep going, that it's gonna be okay. Not that you got this, because you don't need to hear that, but that it's gonna be okay, right? And it's gonna be well, and it's gonna be good at some point if it isn't already.
Yes, that's so good. Well, Bree, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you so much for being willing to do the work in your own experience and your own journey so that now you can help so many other women with this. So please, would you let us know where we can connect with you, listen to your show, and everything else?
Yes. Okay. So YouTube is where we have the show. It's YouTube, and if you just search Brie Clark TV, that's where everything is, or The Real Deal with Brie Clark. And that's Brie with one E. Don't put two in there. Don't put an I in there, nothing. It's just BRE Clark TV. And that's the same with all of my social media. It's Brie Clark TV. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram is probably where I'm most active. And you can, just follow me there. And I kind of put little snippets out, some behind the scenes stuff that we didn't share on YouTube, from our adventure during the show, because I'm a silly person. And so all of that is on there for, for you all to see. And then our website just kind of has some more resources, and we have some merchandise as well for people. Just little reminders that you are the real deal, today, no matter where you are, that you are the real deal. And so that's on our website, at brieclarktv.com or therealdeal.show. They'll take you to the same place.
All right, you guys definitely need to go connect with Bree. She's got so many resources out there. Go check out all the things, listen to the show. But man, Bree, thank you so much for being here. This has been wonderful. And I'm just so grateful for all the work you're doing and the impact that you're having on so many women's lives.
Oh, thank you. You too. Likewise.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tune into another episode of the Byword Show. I love having you here, and I'm so thankful for your support. Don't forget to share a screenshot of this episode to let me know you were here. I can't wait to talk again soon, but in the meantime, be sure to come hang out with me on Instagram, and remember, I am cheering you on.